All right, let's talk about some of the wildest parts of the Bible. You know, the apocalypses. We're talking strange beasts, crazy numbers, epic visions. It can feel, well, totally overwhelming, right? But what if I told you there's a key to unlock it all? Let's dive in and crack this code together.
You know, when we run into these kinds of texts, we usually try to shove them into one of two boxes. The first box, it's the infallible science book idea, that it's all a secret code predicting modern wars in the future. And the second box, that's the one where we just dismiss it all as, a jumble of ancient myths and borrowed legends that don't really hold up to modern science.
But what if both of those boxes are totally wrong? What if they both miss the point entirely? I think there's a third way to look at this, a way that actually gets to what the authors were trying to say in the first place.
So to find that third way, we've got to start with a really basic question. What even is an apocalypse? And trust me, the answer is probably not what you think.
Okay, so this is huge. The word apocalypse doesn't actually mean end of the world, not originally. In the Greek, apocalypsis just means an uncovering, a revelation. It's about pulling back the curtain to show you something you couldn't see before. So the whole point isn't predicting the end of everything. It's about getting a new perspective on everything, a divine one. And here's another key distinction we need to make, the difference between an apocalypse and a prophecy. Think of it like this. An apocalypse is the vision God gives someone. It's the divine download, the message that's received. Prophecy? That's what the person does next. It's the human act of speaking that truth out loud. So one is the input, the other is the output. Makes sense, right? So why were these visions given in the first place? Well, they weren't meant to be some kind of abstract cosmic puzzle. Far from it. They were powerful visual messages of hope. And they were almost always given to people who were really, really suffering. The whole idea was to help them look up from their immediate pain and see that, behind the scenes, God had a much bigger picture, a much bigger plan.
Okay, so if these are basically communications told in pictures, how in the world are we supposed to read them? Well, it's kind of like poetry. Apocalyptic writing has its own special language, a language of symbols. And just like any language, we just have to learn the vocabulary.
And the ancient writers had a whole toolkit of these symbols they would use. For example, you'll see symbolic figures. Think beasts and horns. These aren't literal monsters. They're stand-ins for powerful and, often brutal empires and kings. Then there are symbolic acts, like measuring something, which could mean God is protecting it or judging it. And then you have symbolic names. This is a big one. When you read Babylon in one of these texts, it's not just about the old city. It became a code word, the ultimate symbol for a godless, oppressive empire. The question then becomes, for every generation, who is our Babylon? And of course, you've got symbolic numbers and colors, each with their own special meaning. Let's zoom in on the numbers for a second, because this is super important. When you see the number 4, for instance, you should be thinking the world or creation. The 4 corners of the earth, the 4 winds. The number 7 is really cool. It often stands for completion or a divine promise. And 12, that almost always points to the people of God, the 12 tribes, the 12 apostles. The key takeaway here is that these numbers aren't for doing math. They're symbols to be interpreted.
Okay, so it's not just about individual symbols like a secret decoder ring. These writers also used bigger patterns in their storytelling to really hammer their message home. And once you start to spot these patterns, the whole structure of a vision can suddenly click into place. Repetition is a huge one, and a perfect example of this is way back in Genesis with Pharaoh's dreams. Remember that? He has 2 totally different dreams, one about fat and skinny cows, another about healthy and withered corn. But they both mean the exact same thing. So why tell it twice? It's for emphasis. It's like the text is screaming, pay attention, this is certain, this is from God, and it's gonna happen.
Another pattern you'll see over and over is this kind of double picture. It's like these texts are always showing you 2 sides of the same coin. On one side, you have judgment for evil, all the scary stuff like fiery swords and plagues. But right alongside it, on the other side of the coin, you always have a picture of salvation for the faithful, the New Jerusalem, a vision of glory. It's justice and mercy, held together, always.
All right, so we've figured out the genre, we're learning the symbolic language, and we know how to spot the patterns. Now we can finally get to the real heart of it all. What does it mean? How do we read this for its intended purpose? And it all starts with asking the right kind of question.
It's so easy to get bogged down in the wrong questions, isn't it? We get stuck debating, hey, did they borrow this from an ancient myth? Or wait, is this part literally scientifically true? But here's the thing. Focusing on those questions, whether you're a skeptic or a super literal reader, makes you miss the entire point of the text.
This right here, this is the key that unlocks everything. The one most important question we should be asking is the one scholar Milton Terry highlights. What ideas was the biblical writer trying to get across to their readers, the people who first heard these words? What was the message of hope, or the warning, or the change in perspective they were supposed to get?
And you know what? When we make that shift, when we start asking that question, it is so freeing. Suddenly, we're not trapped in those endless arguments about literalism versus myth. We're finally able to engage with the powerful religious and moral lessons the text was actually designed to teach. We can finally hear the message it was meant to deliver all along. So let me leave you with this final thought. What if the whole purpose of these ancient, wild texts was never about giving us a crystal ball to predict our future, but instead to give us a mirror to challenge our present? What if they're meant to make us look at our own world, our own powerful systems, our own lives, and see them from a completely different, divine perspective? Now that's something to think about.